Today is April 7th, 2017. Welcome to the show. I do have James Lancia. James is a retired police officer who worked closely with the FBI, DEA, ATF, and statewide narcotics agencies as a patrolman in the Bridgeport Police Department in Connecticut. Lancia is the author of the book, Downtown White Police, Demonizing the Alpha Cop, Glorifying Thugs, and Militarizing Law Enforcement. James, welcome to Renegade Broadcasting once again.
Thanks for having me, Nick. I appreciate that.
Jim, let's get started here. You wanted to talk about South Africa, and then you also mentioned in our email just today, America, Europe, and how dangerous the situation is, from microchipping, false flags in Syria, ethnic hatred and crime, immigration, and the fake media. And then we can touch upon other subjects as we go. So, James, let's get into South Africa.
All right, sure. South Africa, to me, is important because it's being completely ignored by everyone, other than people like us. The mainstream, of course, doesn't touch it. Whenever they don't want to touch something, they're trying to hide something. For your listeners who don't know, I officially applied for the position of South African ambassador from the U.S. I did officially apply. I sent correspondence to the president, and I've had other people in some fairly high positions in South Africa do the same for me, trying to endorse me. Now, is it a shot in the dark? Sure. But I tried, and I offered to do it without being paid. That's how serious I am about this subject. Okay, now South Africa, your listeners are very well informed, but it just, to touch upon it lightly, it just bothers me that the mainstream media, with all their diversity and all their equality, never report on the fact that the South African white is a minority in South Africa, and they are now the most endangered people on this earth, statistically, in not just the farm murders, but overall racial murders by blacks. Now, of course, the South African government sugarcoats it over by just saying it's rampant crime and everybody's subject to it. But the white South African, who is a minority, is 4 times more likely to be killed by murder in South Africa than even a black. So there is something going on there. But as far as South Africa goes, it's even more than just the violence. There's 114 anti-white labor laws on the book. Did you know that, right? If companies hire whites, there's sanctions that could be put on them. There's penalties that are put on them. So it's a deliberate attack on the white population, even for employment. Now you also have the fact that they're becoming impoverished and they're moving into the squatters' camps. There's also the fact that the president himself sings songs about machine gunning white people, the farmers. And he sings it and he dances. I mean, this is the president, and yet no one in the world has any outrage or even brings it up as inappropriate, at least. It's just absolutely mind-boggling. And there's so much more that's going on there. But then the land grab, they now have this land grab where they're going to legally take away land from the white South African. It's absolutely crazy that it's not being talked about. Of course, we know the media is full of shit. Can I swear on this channel?
Oh, yeah, man. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, sometimes I can't help myself.
Let it go, man. Let loose. This is a serious subject matter. So, yeah, let it out, man.
So it bothers me because, first of all, I do believe, I've been saying it's the template for what they're trying to do. The fact that parts of the South African government have filed with the UN and have stated that they are under a genocide, and even the UN actually, who of course I think is demonic, they recognize the fact that they are at a certain level of genocide. So it's all being denied and nobody's talking about it, and it really bothers me. And it's just part of the overall plan. What really bothers me, Nick, is that I do know the overall plan, and there's so many facets to it that's why I kind of wanted to touch on a lot of different things, because it's not just black hatred of white or getting someone back for apartheid. This is a plan, and it's being orchestrated, and it's been orchestrated, and it's happening here in the U.S. also.
We got to let our listeners realize who was responsible for forming the ANC in the first place. You're people like Joe Slovo.
Right. They're communist, and a lot of them are Zionist Jews, and nobody wants to talk about that. They're behind a lot of the subversion and this destabilization of once great nations.
And unfortunately, a lot of the white South Africans won't even touch that subject matter.
Nobody wants to touch it. And here's the thing that bothers me. Let's say I'm not particularly chastising anyone, right? Mm-hmm. Let's just say I'm open-minded about it, which of course I know really in depth what's going on. But let's say I'm looking at it from a perspective as a police officer who's investigating a crime. When certain people come up, you do have to mention it. But what bothers me is you cannot even mention the fact that certain people are behind certain things. It's like if you do that, again, you're just completely labeled. And it's impossible to get to the bottom of a problem if you cannot call out who's causing the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it goes back to that famous quote. People pin it on Voltaire. I've found that it wasn't actually originated from him, but to know who rules over you, realize who you're not allowed to talk about.
Right. And I just think, Americans in general get the wrong impression about who Israel is as far as as far as Christians go and as far as scripture. They're not God's chosen people. In fact, when the Bible talks about Israel, it's talking about God's people. It's talking about Christians in reality. I know you don't want to get into a religious thing, but that's just for all these Zionist Christians. They're just completely deluded. I can bring up many scriptural references to prove that, but this isn't the forum for it right now. But what's going on is not just Zionist Christians, but you got our politicians. Every one of our politicians just always mentions that Israel's first. I don't know why. I don't know why they're such a great ally. They haven't fought a war for us. They've started wars that we had to finish and fight. And a lot of these false flags, including, I believe, Syria, just the latest one in Syria, which we retaliated with bombing. Mm-hmm. I believe they're behind this one also.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a hoax of a chemical attack. We had it being all documented by the White Helmets, who have already been outed as a NGO supported by the State Department, USAID, and British financing, as well as the company who gobbled up academia, Eric Prince's company, Constellation or something like that. They're all part of this chipping in of this NGO called the White Helmets over in Syria. And they just won an Oscar, right? Netflix documentary that came out on the White Helmets.
It's so ridiculous. I cannot believe how they portray things. First of all, I don't think many Americans don't realize Syria was a stable country before we messed with it, okay? Everybody knows that Assad protected the different religious groups in Syria. It's ISIS that's causing the problems, and the U.S. is formed ISIS, and the U.S. was funding and arming ISIS. And now, we're assisting them again by bombing Assad. And the thing is I just don't see how. It's either the government, higher ups in the government are that stupid or they're that evil. Either way, it's bad that they don't see this. And I know, of course, they see it. And the thing is, look, I backed Trump in the election because, of course, between Hillary and Trump, I didn't think there was a choice. Now, I still want to give the guy a chance, but the knee-jerk reaction of just bombing Syria to punish Assad for some gas attack that hasn't even been investigated. Even if he didn't believe it was a false flag, it should have been investigated before anything was done. All of a sudden, this action was taken prematurely, I believe.
James, I've got a clip that Kyle's going to play real quick. It's 3 minutes. It's President Trump's speech over at Mar-a-Lago, over in Palm Beach, after he met up with the Chinese president. All right, we're going to play this clip from Donald Trump.
Fellow Americans. On Tuesday, Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad launched a horrible chemical weapons attack on innocent civilians. Using a deadly nerve agent, Assad choked out the lives of helpless men, women, and children. It was a slow and brutal death for so many. Even beautiful babies were cruelly murdered in this very barbaric attack. No child of God should ever suffer such horror. Tonight I ordered a targeted military strike on the airfield in Syria from where the chemical attack was launched. It is in this vital national security interest of the United States to prevent and deter the spread and use of deadly chemical weapons. There can be no dispute that Syria used banned chemical weapons, violated its obligations under the Chemical Weapons Convention, and ignored the urging of the UN Security Council. Years of previous attempts at changing Assad's behavior have all failed, and failed very dramatically. As a result, the refugee crisis continues to deepen, and the region continues to destabilize, threatening the United States and its allies. Tonight I call on all civilized nations to join us in seeking to end the slaughter and bloodshed in Syria, and also to end terrorism of all kinds and all types. We ask for God's wisdom as we face the challenge of our very troubled world. We pray for the lives of the wounded and for the souls of those who have passed. And we hope that as long as America stands for justice, then peace and harmony will, in the end, prevail. Good night, and God bless America and the entire world. Thank you.
All right, that's Donald Trump there, Mr. Lancia. And the air base that was attacked with cruise missiles from destroyers in the Mediterranean Sea. Of all the air bases, this is coming from Leith Fidel. He's a editor over at Al Masdar News. Of all the air bases the U.S. can target in Syria, they target the one installation the Syrian Air Force uses to specifically bomb ISIS. And then he also says there were no chemical weapons at the Sharet air base. The U.S. destroyed the Syrian air defense system that target Israeli warplanes. So that took away defense from Israel's warplanes, as well as what they utilize for a strategic purpose to bomb ISIS. So then as soon as this airbase was bombed, 6 people were actually killed, by the way. ISIS, or whatever name they go by, actually just started attacking them like within 20 miles distance from where the airbase was attacked. So that actually helped ISIS by destroying this airfield.
Right. Well, not too long ago, the U.S. military declined to become the Air Force for ISIS, and they stood down. So now it looks like we're back into the same old game. It was this kind of a disturbing speech. Again, he's either very uninformed, which I find it hard to believe, or I don't know why he would. First of all, let's put it this way: if anybody could just launch a chemical attack, any of our enemies could launch a chemical attack anywhere, and get our military to respond in that way, then there'll be never-ending wars, and you could use the U.S. military to be your strong arm. I mean, it's clear that ISIS did this, or at least it has to be investigated. Why didn't he call Assad and ask him? I mean, it's absolutely crazy that Assad would even do this. He didn't do it. It's disturbing that American military is being led into this ridiculous, never-ending war in Middle East. And one thing I got to say, this is amazing to me. We've been in Afghanistan and Iraq for how long now? I mean, World War II, for whatever the people's feelings on the war, it was over in 4 years with American intervention, And however, we feel it was a ridiculous war also, but it was fought and ended in 4 years. Now we're fighting these assholes in the fucking Middle East, and we can't beat them. We can't annihilate them. Of course we could. It's just they don't want to. And it's disturbing that these guys still got to go to war, and we still got to spend billions and trillions of dollars and become in debt and have all these bases everywhere. And then they're still allowing all these people to come into our country. So not only are we spreading radical Islam all over once stabilized Middle Eastern countries, but now we're destabilizing Western countries with all these fucking miserable fucking terrorist Muslims. I mean, look at England, look at France, look at Sweden. They're done. Those people out there are done. There's going to be Sharia law. The government is against their own people. Okay? The EU is all part of it. I mean, there's so much to talk about. The thing is a lot of your listeners already know this, but my God, I don't think many people really know the whole picture or the whole end game.
Well, one of the founders of the EU was Kodanov Kalergi. It was one of his masterminds. And people who are aware of the white genocide topic are typically aware of who Kodanov Kalergi is. So as far as the Sweden issue, there was just a truck attack. We're seeing a lot of these truck attacks happening. James, have you looked into the angle of another Operation Gladio type scenario where it's statecraft staged operations that take place, a lot of crisis actors, and sometimes they utilize a Muslim patsy to be the person that they pin it on?
Oh, yeah, well, absolutely. Well, under Obama, most of those incidents that happened were false flags. I mean, we're all aware of that.
Yep.
They're all bullshit. I mean, absolute bullshit. And if they weren't false flags, they were staged or they were set up. So we can have a relatively peaceful and safe nation here in the U.S., but they don't want it. They don't want it to be peace and peaceful. They want it to be in turmoil so they can, and that's another thing, they're unleashing the police state because of this. Now, because I was a tough cop doesn't mean I believe in a police state. In fact, that's one of the most important things about my book, Downtown White Police. I talk about tough policing and tough neighborhoods. I worked in the toughest neighborhood in the United States. The whole city was tough at the time. But, there was a housing project there that was rated the worst in the United States. So I know what it is to work in a tough neighborhood, and I know sometimes you have to use a heavy hand with piece of shit criminals, not with the public, okay? But cops knew how to discern between the two. Now, there was always bad apples, but for the most part, tough policing was used on crime, not on everyday people. Now, here's what they're doing today. Law-abiding people are suffering under a police state because they're allowing crime to get out of control and people are welcoming more of a police state. So it's just all ushering into what they want. Eventually, it's complete control. And that's what's going to happen.
I had Brendan O'Connell on my show recently, and we were getting deep and dirty into the Israeli tech industry and how they pretty much control pretty much a lot of the new startups in the tech industries and how they're spying on us. And James, what would you like to add to what was just talked about with Syria?
Well, that's the whole thing. I mean, we all know Obama funded and was aiding ISIS. Even Trump said that. But yet, if we know that he aided and funded and armed ISIS, why is that not treason? It's almost like all these treasonous acts are being brought to light, but now they're almost trying to inure us to it, to where, okay, so they spied on Americans, they unmasked American names, they aided and abetted, and gave comfort to the enemy. Okay, but we're not going to do anything about it. See, it's to me as a law enforcement officer, it's like, okay, those are crimes. Now do something about it.
Exactly. Well, shit. 9/11 was, we already know who a lot of the perpetrators are.
Yeah.
What's being done about it. Allegedly, people like Kissinger are wanted for war crimes wherever they go, but a lot of these people are untouchable anyway. A lot of them belong to secret societies and different memberships and groups that cause them to be untouchable in their society.
Well, we all know they've committed crimes. There's proof. Just like George Soros, why he's allowed to walk around, I'll never know. And, there's plenty to indict him on. Plenty. I mean, if people don't really, maybe a lot of people don't understand, some of the legalities of what he's been doing, but he is definitely broken a lot of laws. And everybody knows it. But why don't they indict him? They're just proving that the powerful are above the law. And they're rubbing it in our faces.
Here is a clip of Brian Williams from MSNBC. Kyle, if you got that clip, it's about 30 seconds.
Go into greater detail. We see these beautiful pictures at night from the decks of these two U.S. Navy vessels in the Eastern Mediterranean. I am tempted to quote the great Leonard Cohen, "I'm guided by the beauty of our weapons." And they are beautiful pictures of fearsome armaments making what is for them a brief flight over to this airfield. What did they hit? What are you convinced?
Fucking disgusting. Oh, God.
Oh, USA!
Oh, America.
America, yeah. Oh, my God. It pisses me off, Nick. I'm so pissed. I'm there, man. I'm really pissed.
The great Leonard Cohen, man.
Oh, how about remember that freaking freak, that little owl-faced bitch, 500,000 Iraqi children? Well, it was worth it. Yeah, and then this new asshole standing up here going, "Oh, but they killed little babies, beautiful little babies."
Yeah, the incubator baby scenario is pretty similar. A lot of people are making that same comparison to what's going on in Syria right now.
If Israel fire bombs and napalms, or not napalm, but what is that, phosphorus, the little babies in Lebanon or
Palestine and Lebanon, yeah, and Iraq, yeah.
They were big, ugly babies, so that's fine.
We've got Stephen Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary. Syria sanctions coming soon. Good old Skull and Bones, Goldman Sachs, and Dune Capital, Dune Entertainment, who's business partners with James Packer, a Hollywood film production company, Scientology, James Packer, and billionaire as well.
It's a complete 180 now. Just a couple of days ago, he was talking about blasting ISIS off the face of the earth. And now we're using missile attacks for ISIS. I mean, everybody knows it. ISIS was celebrating.
Everybody was celebrating pretty much in our government and in Israel. And I think Saudi Arabia was very happy with what happened.
Hillary was happy, and so was Schumer. So
actually, Schumer, and Hillary was calling for the same exact thing that happened prior, like the same day.
Wrong, right there.
You were wanting to talk about microchipping. What were you thinking as far as where are you going with that? I know that there was a club in Sweden, I think, that was kind of bragging about how they microchip their employees. I think that was just in the news just this week.
Yeah, but it goes way beyond that. That's just trying to get people to think it's cool and everything.
Yeah.
The Rockefellers have already said that, microchipping is the end game. I mean, everybody is going to be chipped. Not we have to resist it, of course, but you're not going to be able to go get your money out of your bank without the chip. You're not going to be able to buy food. You're not going to be able to work. Okay, so this chip is going to be the identification. And most people are going to accept it because you got all this terrorism, all this immigration. So one day, a certain leader, whoever it is going to say, well, we finally got to do something about this. So let's all get chipped and we'll find out who belongs where, who's a criminal, who's not, who's legal, who's not. And then they're going to use identity theft to say, oh, you're going to prevent identity theft and everything else. voter fraud, everything. It's all leading up to that. Okay? So, yes, everybody, it's going to happen. It was going to be in the Obamacare legislation. I don't know if it's still in there, but it is. They did want it in there, and it's eventually coming. When? I don't know, but it's all there. In fact, what is Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, owns the building where they're making them in 666 Fifth Avenue, Lucent Technologies.
Lucent, yeah, that was part of the original AT&T conglomeration.
Right, so it's not just there anyway. This is worldwide.
They have an interesting logo, by the way, too.
What's that?
The corporate logo of Lucent Technologies.
Oh, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, corporate logos kind of speak a lot about what the corporation is really all about, with their esoteric meanings behind the symbolism that they use.
So what we were talking about, the microchip is the end game. Well, that's how you control everybody. All right? That's what they want, but it goes even deeper than that. A lot of people ask me, well, what's the line in the sand? And, I've been thinking about that, because we do need leaders right now. We have no leaders. I mean, in days past, we've had warriors and warrior kings as leaders, knights. Now what do we got? Pathetic, weak, pencil-necked politicians who sold out, who are worse than any criminal. All right? That's what we call leaders today. We need real leaders, because if we don't have real leaders, everybody's going to be running around on their own, and nobody's going to know what to do. That's how you lose, by not having a cohesive front with real leaders. And all I'm talking about is just resisting a terrible thing that they're going to be putting on the whole world. And I know it sounds a little dramatic, but it's true. I mean, it's absolutely going to happen. But that's my line in the sand. I mean, there's nothing we can do right now. Okay? There's absolutely we can't vote anybody in, because we all know it's bullshit. Mm-hmm. Okay? I mean, listen, I'm still trying to give Trump a little time. I'm actually trying to become an ambassador, so I got to do the right thing here.
James, we're titling the show tonight The Black Pill, so you're going to possibly take that black pill tonight and realize that Trump is just part of the machine that we're fighting against.
Well, you may be right. I know one thing. I do know this. I know he's surrounded by all the wrong people. And one of the worst things that bothered me was that he ran saying he was going to drain the swamp. He ran saying he was going to put Hillary in prison. And then as soon as he won, he said, oh, she did a great job for her country. I mean, that bothered me. And of course, we all try to deny it. But the thing that bothers me is that there are so many people that should be brought up on charges, from Brennan to Schumer to Pelosi, the Clintons, of course, and Obama himself. We all know it. There's so many crimes committed that if you can't see it, you're brain dead. And it's funny, because we do like to deny it, because it's so much for our brain. Like, I've been aware of chemtrails for years now, and I noticed them years ago, and I said, that looks strange to me. And then when someone told me, hey, that's chemical, they're destroying, they're trying to dumb us down, they're trying to do things with the aluminum, barium, and strontium. So then I learned about it, and then I said, okay, fuck. Look what they're doing to our skies. And why didn't I really notice that before? But for a little while, for a couple of months, I looked up, and I was with my friend, and I said, that can't be what it is. It's not what they say it is. And my friend said, it is, and you know it. And I said, I do know it. But I wanted to deny it, because it's nasty, and there's nothing we can do about it.
I just covered that on my show last week, how they just classified chemtrails they have different names for chemtrails now. They've created a new classification as a new cloud type.
Right. Well, here's the funny thing. They'll classify, for dummies, they classify it as contrails. Everybody knows they're not contrails. Okay. For people that are informed, they say it's climate control, and they're trying to block out the sun. They're even saying it, which is, again, crazy. Climate change is bullshit. Everybody knows it. But even if they were trying to do something good, you're blocking out the sun. Are you crazy? I mean, the sun is the only thing I go outside for now. is to look up at the blue sky and see the sun. They're taking that away. Fuck, man, I'm really getting pissed. You know, that the world doesn't even see this, and that none of our fucking asshole politicians ever say anything about it. God damn.
Hey, James, they've also created a society where they have us indoors now. Our jobs are in offices. We're not building anything outdoors so much anymore. We're not outdoors. We're not farming. We're indoors on gadgets, on smart devices. We're in front of computers, and we're getting the harmful rays and the frequencies from the Wi-Fi and the frequencies from the electricity and the screens that we look at.
Oh, man, it's crazy. I mean, I went out for coffee the other day, and I saw 5 women on their phones, all looking at the phones, and I confronted them all. I go, look at you people. You're all on the phone. It looks ridiculous. You're getting coffee. And a couple of them laughed, and the rest of them ignored me. And, I was trying to be nice. I said, I'm not trying to insult you. And one nice lady goes, you're right, but we could do so much on them. I go, I know, but you have to do it 24 hours a day, even when you're trying to get coffee. I mean, I laughed and she laughed. But it's absolutely, does anybody realize how stupid everybody looks on those things? It's unbelievable. Of course you could do shit on them. You could do a lot of shit with that stuff, but you don't have to be on it 24 hours a day like an idiot. It's unbelievable how brainwashed everybody is.
Well, the concept,
may be a little old-fashioned, but damn.
Yeah, the concept of having to touch the screen, touch screens, and people actually have like some sort of separation anxiety when they don't know where their cell phone, their mobile device is at. And this is getting us one step closer to transhumanism, merging man and machine.
Oh, yeah, they're trying to turn us all into slaves. You know, old school guys like me, I'm still young enough to be strong, but old enough to remember when this shit wasn't around. And that's important. But the new guys, the new kids today, God, I'll tell you, one more generation of this brainwashing, and that's it. You got to realize it. This next generation, first of all, look at the fucking assholes they're putting out now. These people, these brain-dead white people, actually protesting to destroy their lives, to not give themselves any opportunity. What are they going to do when they hit 30 and 40 and they're not going to have any jobs and they're going to be these fucking losers? They're going to have nothing. And you know, Soros isn't going to be there to pay them to fucking protest anymore. They got nothing to look forward to. It's unbelievable how stupid these people are. They're so brainwashed. There's nothing more I could say. They're demented, brainwashed idiots. And if you look at them, they do look like a different species of people. I'm talking about the whites. The whites doing it. Well, the whites have been so dumbed down and so destroyed that this is how you can have this happen in Sweden. You know, I was a little more sympathetic with Sweden in the beginning, but I lost that sympathy. And you know what? It's a self-protection, because I look at it, and then you look at it, and the people in Sweden put down other Swedes, nationalist Swedes, for just confronting the problem. So they're just killing themselves out there. I mean, it's hard for me to have sympathy anymore when they just want to destroy themselves. You know, there's nothing we could do for them anymore. They got to either start a war now or forget it. They're slaves. And I always said this, and I don't know why anybody listens, but especially in Europe, you know, you don't have weapons or anything, but you can get 10, 20,000 people. You could march on your houses of government and demand that this immigration thing be stopped. But they're not going to do it. The fighting spirit is gone.
In California, they're talking about making that state a sanctuary state. I guess that passed within the state of California. So we'll see what happens. California tried doing the exact opposite back in the 80s and 90s, Proposition 187, to prevent immigrants and undocumented people from obtaining benefits and things of that nature. And then the federal government came in and passed a federal law to pretty much abolish Proposition 187. So will Trump remove the sanctuary status from California? We'll see, huh?
Well, that's where we're all going to. I'm sure that's going to make California a much better place. But the thing is this, Trump said he was going to take away federal funds. Let's see if he does it. I want to see something done, because so far I'm not seeing a lot done. And, you know, they're stepping up the arrests and deportations, but That's just something they should have been doing a long time ago anyway.
Yeah, and you saw a lot of that happening already, ramping up right before Trump even took office. A lot of the ICE agents starting to kick doors down, even when Obama was in office towards the very end. So they were starting to give us that sense of feel of what was going to be taking place when Trump took office.
Yeah, just look at the difference, right? The 80s and 90s, they were fighting against that, and now they're all voting for it. So it just shows you in one generation just how things have changed. And
exactly.
The next generation is going to be worse.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, too, with Chicago being classified as a sanctuary city. And him and Rahm Emanuel are kind of friends. People aren't aware of that, but his brother, Ari Emanuel, it was his Hollywood agent. So they're buddies. For Donald Trump. Ari Emanuel, who just purchased UFC, too, recently, was Donald Trump's Hollywood agent.
Well, I'm sure he knows a lot of people, but the problem with what I'm seeing with him now is the rhetoric was strong, and it's why we like him. And remember, we don't have a choice over people. I mean, he seemed to be the guy that wanted to do it, and we believed he would do it. Maybe naively, okay? So you can throw me in there and criticize me, but at least you have to back somebody. You can't have Hillary Clinton. That would have been the end right now. But with Trump, yes, he says a lot, but I don't see anything being done. People literally should be indicted right now. And with this new spying scandal and all this unmasking that Rice, she should be definitely brought before. Yeah. But see, the thing that bothers me, when you bring people before Congress, all they do is give them tongue lashings, and then they walk away laughing. There's no arrests or threats of arrests or indictments. It's just all tongue lashing. You shouldn't do this. How outrageous is that? And then they walk away laughing with their pencil. So nothing gets done. We're all at this point where we're starting to realize that nothing's going to get done.
It seems like a lot of distractions that are being thrown our way. Not only the unmasking with Susan Rice going on, and there's some sort of battle going on right now between Kushner and people who support Bannon, and people are calling for Kushner to be fired. Kushner's actually he was just recently in Iraq.
I don't trust that guy at all. I know he shouldn't be there. It's too much in the family. I don't like a lot of the people he picked anyway. I think now, if he did want to do something where he was going to do the right thing, I think he's being pressured by people on the right and the left. And he's afraid to do anything now. I mean, at best, okay? Because I'm not going to be completely against him right now because I just don't know. I mean, maybe I'm being naive again, but maybe I'm denying it. But I want to give him a chance and see if it's just bad advice. But unless you drain the swamp, you're gonna have these people around you. See, I would know how to run. Honestly, I swear to God, I could run this country. I would make it a great place. I just forget it. I tell you right now, now you look at it, you look at how fucked up supposed democracy really is. Democracy's bullshit. First of all, we're not a democracy. We are a republic, and we're not being represented, period. And that's frustrating. It makes me look back at guys like Mussolini and say, yeah, maybe that's what we fucking need. Someone who cares about his country and will do whatever he can for his country. Now, you can say whatever you want about Mussolini. My parents lived under Mussolini. Okay, my dad actually worked under him as in the Italian military. So you can say what you want about him. They loved him. Okay? He did great things for Italy. And that's all that mattered. He did it for Italy. Okay? He didn't do it for the world. And they painted him out to be a villain, whatever he did. He got rid of the mafia. And nobody ever was able to do that. He got rid of the mafia. My parents were poor. My mom was a poor school kid in Italy. They never had books until Mussolini came in, and he got them books. And he did great things for the poor in Italy. And he was fighting communism in Italy too.
Yeah, there was a good Trump meme I saw, something along the lines of, "Man, we're in World War III now." And then the other person was like, "Well, at least I have my job of building air conditioners."
Yeah. Well, is that like someone's just saying they're content with what they have and they don't care what's going on around them.
Hey, as long as the economy is well and I got food on my plate and I got a job and I got something to do every day, then life is good. Who cares what else is going on in the world?
Right. Well, that's the problem. I'm pretty content myself, but I realize there's a problem. And if you don't speak out against it, everybody's way of life is going to be changed drastically. Plus, I don't like seeing innocent people get messed with. There's a lot of good people out there that just don't know how to fight back. And they need people to speak up for them. And, that's what we're trying to do. But, I've always been there. I risked my life for people many times. If you read the book, you'll see some of the shit that I've been in. And that's real. That's not fighting some Middle East war that doesn't protect us. I fought wars on the streets so people could sleep at night. I know a lot of people on the station don't give a shit about cops, and that's fine. There's a lot of stupid cops, but there's still a lot of good guys. I'm in contact with a lot of guys, and they really do care. But they're trying to pit people against the law and order. We do need law and order, but we don't have law and order. Hillary Clinton could run around doing whatever she wants, and then just the average Joe, can't get away with shit. So we know that, but they're trying to make it so crazy on the street that people are going to welcome a federalized police department or martial law or militarized police, which I'm against.
With the police officers that go to Israel for training are coming back, and a lot of the officers that are joining the force, a lot of them are ex-military. So we have some pretty insane people in the force nowadays. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, I would agree only for this, not every military. I was a cop with many Vietnam vets, and these guys were decent guys, and they weren't how they're painted out to be. They were good cops. Now, what you're talking about is they're going and they're learning shit from the Israeli police, which again is an apartheid police state. So I don't think we have and I put that in my book, we have no business learning something from them because their policing is not like our policing. We don't need to make any drastic changes in our policing. We just keep doing what we used to do when I was a cop. Okay, but now they're handcuffing cops to point a pun, and they're glorifying the criminal. They're glorifying people that are causing the problems. And
Hollywood doesn't help. The media with parentheses around it.
Everything is against us. Everything is against the white male. Okay? And that's what they got to get rid of first. I put them speeches in my book. Abe Foxman, in front of that crowd in New York in 1994, I think it was, how he wanted to destroy the white Christian race and the white Aryan race. So he made a speech like that. Nobody says anything about it. It's all documented. It's like absolutely fucking crazy, man. I never even thought about this until I realized that in the 1950s, the white European race was roughly 30% of the world population. Now it's like roughly 8%.
Correct.
So that means we're declining and everybody else is gaining. And that's not just because of low birth rates. Okay? It goes a lot deeper than that.
But what does it matter, James? We're all the same.
Oh, yeah, we're all the same. Yeah. It's funny. If we were all the same, then why would we need affirmative action? You see what I mean? Why would we have to discriminate against whites to put blacks in there? So, yeah, let's all be the same, but let's all compete against each other. We know we're not all the same, and we don't have to be all the same for people to function. Now, am I against this forced integration? Absolutely. I'm against anything that's forced. You understand? Anything that's forced is wrong. And it doesn't mean I hate anybody, but they make people hate other races because they force them upon you. And then they make it seem like the white male is responsible for all the ills of the world. And so everybody hates us. And that's false. It's false perception.
Well, we're definitely seeing a lot of what was allegedly said in the Albert Pike 3 World Wars letter to Giuseppe Mazzini, where you're seeing how a lot of the white Christians are merging forces with Jews to have a third world war with Islam. So we see that happening, but then we also see how whites are being demoralized and belittled and just mistreated, ostracized out of society to where we're the black sheep now. So, but we're still fighting wars for Israel at the same time. So that's where we're at today.
That's where we're at. But if you look at Europe, they've completely just, maybe not as much in the East, but Eastern Europe, but Western Europe has completely just they've given over. I mean, they're being led by satanic elements. I mean, the EU is leading them, and they're allowing it now. That's why nationalism is so important. Every country take care of itself. If you look at the EU, if Greece doesn't do well, then things collapse. And if Italy's about to collapse now, and then that's going to cause. Don't they understand that even the U.S. with the overpowering federal government was never supposed to be this powerful? That's why the states were so important to be independent. And honestly, the only hope I think for this country is individual state secession. Now, let me put this to you. Why wouldn't this work, Nick? If you want ultra-liberal states, sanctuary states, I say let them have their sanctuary states if people want it, right?
Sure.
If you want conservative states like Texas or red states, we separate. And then if you want anybody that wants to be part of a federal union, they could be part of a federal union. So basically you have three fractures. You have the liberal cupped sanctuary states and let them just die off with each other. And then you have the common sense, real American value and law and order, freedom states. And then you have your federal government states. I don't know why we can't do that, but it's all about the overbearing power. How are we ever going to have an election again when states like that are so powerful? New York, California, they control the elections. So we're always going to have this problem, okay? Now, it's funny, right? When Obama was president, states like Texas were talking about seceding, and I would look at some of the comment boards, and the liberals would say, oh, you can't secede, we'll bomb you. And we'll strafe you with nuclear weapons. You could never leave. Ha, ha, ha.
Gotta love the anti-war left, right?
Exactly. But now, under Trump, the left is talking, oh, California, we should secede. We could live without those crazy conservatives. Now they want to leave.
Yep.
You see, it's like, go, get the fuck out. Nobody gives a fuck. Get the fuck out. We don't want to be part of you. That's the thing. I'll move to the first state that secedes and that wants to do the right thing.
And there is a article that I wanted to cover real quick, and it's called The Black Pill. It's from an author that I don't really like too much, but this is related to the show. For almost 30 years, I've written about nihilism as a philosophy. In my view, nihilism is the gateway to an all-useful thought. It clears aside the human pretense and solipsistic illusion and replaces it with a cold, unflinching, logical, and realistic look at our world and our place within it, including the Darwinian need to adapt. More disturbingly, it shows us that the standard of life is not how to explain away our failings, but that each time we observe a better method than our own, we will be dissatisfied and self-hating if we do not adopt it. Without nihilism, religion becomes obedience out of fear, not a choice to seek out possible metaphysical dimensions to the universe. With nihilism, science becomes applied logic, literature becomes communication, art becomes Jungian symbolism. It is a gateway to a kingdom of darkness in which suddenly the photo negative of normal human life invert by social impulses, which are individual fears amplified and then placated by a collective illusion, is negative, again, revealing that what we call light is darkness and vice versa. Illusions fall in cold white flame. In my view, nihilism is the black pill. It is not egoism, because nihilism denies the notion of humanity and the individual being the center of the world. In nihilism, as in the universe, the self is a tiny portion of a great vast space that is mostly emptiness. Nihilism is mostly negation or destruction of human illusions and plans that turned out to be unrealistic. That process begins by attacking the deception of the mind by itself. The black pill provides a gateway into an entirely different way of seeing the world, where most people live in a purely social world, where they assume the goodwill of others. Black-pilled people see a natural struggle every bit as violent and constant that is experienced by a common mouse. Predators surround us and parasites infest us unless we actively and aggressively remove them without mercy. In the black pill world, government is nothing more than a parasite. Salesmen are predators hoping to convince you to pay high prices for something that is easy for them to acquire. Police and taxmen are parasites as well, looking for some way to justify taking money and time from you. Most people are parasites and predators alike who want to use you as a means towards their own aggrandizement. In addition, all but a few people, 1 in 100 maybe, are delusional to the edge of clinical insanity. So that is the black pill. What do you think of nihilism and the black pill there, James?
Well, you don't really want to know what I think. I don't like that point of view. It's not my point of view.
Right.
You can be skeptical about the world, but you don't have to look at it like that. Again, everybody has their own thing. All right. One thing I always like to say is that we are so split apart because we have different beliefs. We don't have to be enemies because I'm a Christian. I'm a real Christian, not a Catholic, not a Baptist, not a Zionist Christian. I am the embodiment of true Christianity from the Word of God. Now, that's a very different thing. That's freeing to me. That makes me free. And if you look, now again, I know most of your audience is not Christian, but it doesn't mean we have to hate each other because we're on the same page as far as the world is. The world is the enemy of God. It even says in the Bible, okay? So everything that we know, it's in Scripture. But let's put it this way. Remember, okay, Europe used to be strong, right? We realize that, right? We conquered the world, right? Europe? Yeah. We can agree with that. The European white. Now look at them. They have fallen away from their faith, and even if it just kept them cohesive, they've fallen away from it. Sweden is one of the most godless countries in Europe. So look at how they're the most cucked. See, everybody likes to equate. Listen, again, I'm against the Pope. He's a fucking antichrist. Okay, so don't think of me as, oh my God, he's backing the Pope, I'm not. Those guys are antichrists. They're bad. They're the bad guys. And there's many of them. But if you look at the countries that have fallen away from their faith, they're the weakest. They're the ones most vulnerable. They're the ones most allowing Sharia law and the Muslims in there. And again, you don't have to agree with me, but these are facts that it's showing them. Look at all these communists. They're godless. They're atheists. So we got to realize that we got to find a middle ground where we can unite together. And I did a radio broadcast talking about us uniting. We need to unite and not bash each other for our beliefs and focus on the enemy. What do you think about that?
Well, I totally agree that we need to have our eye on the prize, and that is elimination of the enemy and having our own utopia. I don't want to get into the Marxist ideologies of utopias, but... Can
I ask you something?
Yeah, go ahead.
How do you and your listeners propose to get that utopia? I'm just curious.
Well, really just the simple fact of having freedom of association and freedom of disassociation, like what you were talking about with forced integration and things that are anti-white policies that are in place, like affirmative action. So elimination of all of those sort of things, pre-1965 civil rights acts and immigration acts and things of that nature.
Yeah, I agree. I truly believe that this forced integration and forced
assimilation
has created race problems worse than they ever were. And it has created this mess that we call the United States today, and is now happening in Europe. I agree with you. It is not Christian to do that. I mean, even in Scripture, it says not to mix the races. Okay, so it talks about that. It also talks about ethnos versus ethnos. There's going to be race wars, and in the end, and this is all being coordinated to, you do know that this is all coordinated for us all to hate each other and to create such a mess that they're going to have to come in and take over, right?
Absolutely. This goes way back, Medici, Machiavellian, the divide of even the Italian city-states to war with one another to have divide and conquer. That actually occurs in America as it is, just with sports teams alone, where certain cities are at war with one another just because of a stupid sporting event.
Yeah, sports. I mean, I used to be into sports. I played football, but now I look at it as such a stupid waste of time and money. And it is just to control the masses and to get you to drink beer and eat hot dogs and get fat. That's what
James, Circus Maximus was before the Colosseum in Rome, and it still exists today. Bread and circuses.
Yeah, that's that thing where they go round and round with the chariots.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we can kind of agree on things and we can disagree on things. It doesn't make us enemies. And I think that's what we need to do, because we've broken up into so many factions that we don't even know how to unite anymore. It's fine for you to have your beliefs and me to have my beliefs, as long as we recognize the enemy. And the enemy's out there. I just think we do need to find a way to either live with it or live without it. Now, politically speaking, legally speaking, how do we do it? Well, they're not going to let you disassimilate. They're not going to undo all this civil rights garbage. So then what do? The next legal thing to do would be for a state to secede. But even the state governments are all nutbags too. So I doubt if anybody's going to ever secede from the Union. What do you think?
Well, I think what people can incrementally start doing is have not a out in the open type of plan that, for example, like Craig Cobb did over in North Dakota, and buy up a bunch of property and then start placing white nationalists and National Socialist flags all over your property to scare the people that live in the same town away to where they propose to have you thrown out of that town. I think that people can come up with a plan where they incrementally move to specific areas and have a unwritten rule amongst one another that you won't sell your property to anybody unless, kind of like an association where you decide on who can move in and who can't. That's protecting your freedom of association and disassociation.
That's nice. I mean, I'm all for people, doing that. But remember, eventually the government is going to want to control everything, and they can take over things by eminent domain. I mean, I'm not trying to be a sourpuss, but I'm just using scenarios.
Hey, you're blackpilling me, man.
They take the land, they say, oh, it's too white. Well, look at what AFFH, Permitted Further Fair Housing, they're actually targeting every town and city in the U.S. with a higher population of whites than minorities, and they're filling them in with HUD housing.
Oh, absolutely.
Under Obama, I don't know if Trump abolished that. I haven't heard that.
No.
But that's the way they are going to do it. And then, of course, all these refugees and illegals, they're all over the place. So this is why I don't like the idea so much, because then we become fringe groups, outlaws. And why? Why are we giving up our country that easily, to where you got to live in some northwestern part of the country? And I'm not faulting anybody for doing it. It's something. But, I live in the country myself now, so I can be free and do what I want. But everybody doesn't have that ability. But the thing is why do we always have to do that? And then move out of the city so you can't find work. That's another way how they destroy good people, is by driving them out of the cities so they can't get real good employment.
Yeah, there's a caller that called in on a regular basis. I think he's the one that came up with this concept that what HUD does is create new economies, new cities because of white flight. So you have white people who want to escape the diversity, and then they build a new community. And then what ends up happening, you've got all your multinational corporations and your McDonald's and Starbucks, and then they get to come into that new white enclave, and then HUD comes back in and, diversifies the neighborhood, and then the process just keeps going. And Bob Whitaker from White Genocide Project and White Rabbit Radio, he came up with the meme, diversity means chasing down every white person.
Yeah, that's what they're doing. I mean, first of all, if you take any of these people that are for this, they're not living in those neighborhoods, and they wouldn't dare want to live in those neighborhoods. And why should the poorer whites have to be forced to live in those neighborhoods? I mean, I grew up in those neighborhoods. I know they're nasty, okay? And they're not fun to live in. They're not fun to go to schools with half minority. Even back then, it was just half minority, but it was still constantly race fighting, constantly. So it's not fun. I always wish I grew up like these California kids, like 90210, where beautiful girls and everybody's on the football. I didn't have that shit, man. These people that have these ideals of that everybody's going to get along aren't living with them. And the blacks don't want to be with us either. Okay? So, but if they do, it's just to leech all of us. I mean, it's a fact. It's a fact now. I mean, why do we skirt the obvious all the time?
We have a lot of white traders, though, that have owned properties that are willing to lease their spaces to minorities. And then they bring in a lot of the trash a lot of times. If they open up their property to Section 8 where it's subsidized housing, they're getting a government check. They don't care as long as they're getting paid. So, and then I notice a lot of these Greek restaurant owners, Kyle and I have talked about this in the past, pisses me off. I even mentioned this on the New York Golden Dawn website, how the Greeks are tight-knit, they're a strong-knit community. Everybody knows each other in the Chicago area. But what they do, they own these restaurants and grocery stores, and then they end up hiring Mexican busboys and dishwashers and cooks, and they have their daughters and a lot of other Greek waitresses work there, and then you see integration happening in that way too. And
yeah, well, that's the problem. I mean, you can't even keep your family traditions anymore, and all the old neighborhoods they're gone. They're gone. The Italian Little Italy's. These little ethnic neighborhoods that we all grew up in were so nice. We took it for granted maybe back then, but there was Polish neighborhoods and Italian neighborhoods and Irish neighborhoods. I mean, it was cool back then. I mean,
the Italian feast celebration over here in Chicago in a suburb called Melrose Park, it was known for a huge celebration called the Italian Feast. Now it's like 85-90% Mexican in that town, so it's not really much of a celebration anymore.
Yeah, you got to just give up on the Italian festival if that's what you're going to have. It's not Italian anymore. No. And then, I used to go to this famous pizza place, and I won't really say where it is, but it was a famous pizza place from the 1920s. It's one of the best pizza places in the country. All the presidents would go eat there. All the old Italians would work there. Last time I went there was some black guys making the pizza. And I said, oh, there it goes. I mean, this pizza was made by old Italians for so long. And I don't care. It's not even about the race here. It's just about, it should be Italians making the fucking pizza. Because they're millionaires now making fucking pizza, they can't teach their kids to fucking make pizza. They're too good for that. And that's just bullshit. There's no more ethnicity for us anymore. It's like we just have to get used to everybody else, and we've lost our own identity. We have no more identity.
Hey, we got a caller from Chicago. Welcome to the show.
Hi. How you doing, Nick? This is Ed on the South Side.
Hey, what's going on, Ed?
Kind of tuning in. Who's your guest, sir?
James Lancia.
Where are you from?
Connecticut, right, James?
Yeah, me. I'm from Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, you've been through it over there, I guess. I know I grew up in a white neighborhood, and then it changed when I was in, 6th grade, 7th grade, and unbelievable. Now I'm 40 years later. I'm back working in that neighborhood as a fireman, and the change is just unbelievable. It's ghetto, it's poverty, it boarded up houses every other one. And when I was there as a kid, it was little old ladies were out there scrubbing their sidewalks, keeping it clean. The Lithuanians, the Polish, and now it's disaster. So it's unbelievable.
Yeah, Ed, I don't know if you ever heard my show that I did with my cousin. He's a retired D.C. fire captain. Did you ever hear that podcast ever did?
Don't think I did, Nick. No, I'm sorry.
Hey, shoot me over an email, and then I'll send it over to you. I think you'd enjoy it.
Yeah, and we got to get together one of these days.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah, no, I feel bad about. I had a big thing. I had to move my son. My son is getting on the CPD now. Unbelievable. I'm trying to talk him out of it, but he did it anyway, and he's going to be a cop here in Chicago. And
well, James is the right person to talk to. Go ahead and share what you guys want to talk about as far as what it's like being a police officer. Maybe you can give him some tips there. James talking to Ed about his son joining the force.
Yeah, well, Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, Chicago's a tough town. I mean, it could be a good career, but the way they're doing it today, it's very difficult to be a real cop, to do your job, and there's always that chance to put yourself in a position where you're going to be in real trouble, like the Laquan McDonald. I think that was a fair shooting, but they're indicting him for murder now, so it's tough. It's tough to do your job. I mean, when I was a cop, you could do your job a lot more. I mean, it was still the same problems, but we had a lot more license to really go after criminals. And Bridgeport. I don't know if you've heard of Bridgeport, but we're in the New York City metropolitan area, and we had a worse crime rate than New York City back in the '80s. So it was a pretty bad place. But just like all inner cities. But like you were saying, as a fireman, a lot of times the firemen and the cops really do see the changes of the neighborhoods more, because you work the neighborhoods that you may not want to live in anymore, but you see the changes, and we see the worst parts of the cops and firemen.
Oh, you absolutely. You go into these situations and you see people that I don't want to get too because I'm still on the job, but these people would not survive without aid. I mean, if they had to go out and make a living, it's not happening.
Well, like you were saying, even the old neighborhoods, I come from a poor Italian neighborhood, but the thing is they were poorer than the people now, because they're getting all kinds of aid from the government. But the real poor, they were the ones cleaning the streets and cleaning the sidewalks and everything. They weren't rich. They didn't have money, but they took pride in the neighborhoods,
Correct. Yeah, right. Nobody was rich. It wasn't a rich neighborhood I grew up in, but it's just a shame. It's but it's pushed down our throat. We're forcing it.
It's funny how when I was a cop, we used to have to cover the fire department. There was a lot going on with arson in Bridgeport at the time. They were setting traps for the firemen, and a lot of times we used to have, cops have to cover the fires, So we would cover the fire department. At one time, and what they would do is they would throw rocks at the firemen, or they would take shots at them. And so one day a fireman came up to me and he showed me he had a 38 tucked into his belt. He goes, "Hey, is it all right if I carry this?" I said, "Hey, brother, carry all you want. This is a dangerous place. If you got to use it, use it." You know what I'm saying? That's why I got one on my side. You know what I'm saying? But the firemen were armed sometimes because they were ambushing. That's what these fucking animals do.
That's not all, is the fires. We go on all these, what they call ambulance assist now. And so we're the ones there. And then we have run into a few situations where I got a young guy, an ex-cop. He was on the police, and he somehow got lucky enough to come over to the fire side. And now he's like, he had I don't want to talk too much, but we have to take care of our own situations, because you're in there. All these gangbangers, oh my God, they're there, Usually we don't have too much trouble with them, a little bit, but you got to be on your toes at any time. I mean, the killing is no problem for them. No problem.
There's always a potential for one of them to act out like a fucking animal. You know, I know how it is.
I had one pull a gun on me. I'm making a hydrant. This is got to be 20 years ago. And he pulls a gun on me. What it turned out was, he says, "Don't make that." He didn't say, "Don't make that." He said, "Stop what you're doing," because you know I'm going to send water to put the fire out. What they did is they're burning out another gang member. They're burning out their house or their apartment. But the cops did get him. Back then, it was they took care of him very nicely, man. Just let me put it that way.
I have a cousin who worked as a emergency room nurse downtown in Kansas City, and she was treating a patient, a black guy who ended up freaking out from being overdosed on some sort of narcotics. Had a blade on him, and he stabbed my cousin like over 30 times, and she's
oh my God,
permanently disabled from that.
They didn't. Somebody didn't check him out, to make sure he was disarmed. Oh my God.
No, he wasn't arrested. That was the thing. He just came in.
Right. But still, we do that. We, us and the paramedics on the ambulance, we check these guys out because we don't want that to happen. Something stupid in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Terrible.
Especially if you got a cuckoo too, you got to check them out. But
welcome back to the final half hour, everybody, of Circus Maximus. Real quick, I've got this article from the IMF, or related to the IMF. IMF tells governments how to subvert public resistance against elimination of cash. The IMF in Washington has published a working paper on decashing. It gives advice to governments who want to abolish cash against the will of their citizenry. Move slowly. Start with harmless-seeming measures is part of that advice. In the macroeconomics of decashing, IMF analyst Alexei Karuyev recommends in his conclusions, although some countries most likely will decash in a few years, going completely cashless should be phased in steps. The decashing process could build on the initial and largely uncontested steps, such as the phasing out of large denomination bills, the placement of ceilings on cash transactions, and the reporting of cash moves across the borders. Further steps could include creating economic incentives to reduce the use of cash in transactions, simplifying the opening and use of transferable deposits, and further computerizing the financial system. The private sector-led decashing seems preferable to the public sector-led decashing. The former seems almost entirely benign, e.g. more use of mobile phones to pay for coffee, but still needs policy adaptation. The latter seems more questionable, and people may have valid objections to it. Decashing of either kind leaves both individuals and states more vulnerable to disruptions, ranging from power outages to hacks to cyber warfare. In any case, the tempting attempts to impose decashing by a decree should be avoided given the popular personal attachment to cash. A targeted outreach program is needed to alleviate suspicions related to decashing, in particular that by decashing the authorities are trying to control all aspects of people's lives, including their use of money, or push personal savings into banks. The decashing process would acquire more traction if it were based on individual consumer choice and cost-benefits considerations. So this is a longer article. You can check that out at norbertthering.de, and it's called IMF Tells Governments How to Subvert Public Resistance Against the Elimination of Cash, written April 5th, 2017. So what do you think about that, James?
Well, that's exactly what we were talking about with the chip. It's all going to be, that's where they want all your finances, all your information. It's going to go right in that chip, right in the RFID. That's all part of it. You know that, right? When you go cashless, they're not necessarily going to use cards either. They may start off with that, but they're going to eventually go to the chip, so no one has to carry a card.
Yeah, absolutely. And mobile phones and whatnot are already being utilized, like what was said in this article. And that's kind of like having a chip already in some ways, where you're tracked and traced from the GPS and whatnot from your phone, and you're triangulated at a pretty specific point in the world. So your conversations are being listened to. There's really not much any privacy anymore. And then Trump, of course, eliminated an act or whatever that Obama had in place, that now ISPs can now sell your browsing history.
Yeah, well, there's no privacy. We know that now. But again, that's what they're leading to. That's complete enslavement. When they take away cash, they already started taking away large denominations. You can only take so much out at a time. So they're trying to get people away from that. But that's what it's going to lead to. And there'll be a reason why they'll make it so even using your phone to pay for things isn't going to be as convenient too. It'll be eventually, they'll make it convenient. Getting the microchip will be more convenient than not taking it. But of course, if you don't want to be enslaved, you got to resist it at all costs. It sounds a little dramatic, but it's true.
They're talking about like a universal income, like an even amount of income, just because robots will be replacing humans for the work environment where people will not have a job. So they have to earn money somehow. So I would say that even a chip would be a way of saying, well, you want income? You have to take the chip,
Well, that's what it is. So whether it's a welfare check or some type of subsidy, because there are no jobs and the government's doling out money to everybody because there's not going to be any work. But even if there is work, think about it. In order to access your bank account, you're going to need the chip. In order to pay for anything, you're going to need it. If they want to take money from you for taxes, they'll just take it right out. That's what they really want. They don't want to have to ask you to file for your taxes. They'll just take it right out, whether it's climate taxes or any stupid tax that they put on you. They'll just take it right out. Say, too bad, you can't do shit about it. And that's coming. That is coming. And it could take a catastrophic event to make that happen, but it is coming. And
we're seeing that happen in India already, and I think in Sweden or Norway have gone that route, cashless as well.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even know how far they've gone yet, but
pretty advanced already. And a lot of what to expect in America and the rest of the world, you got to follow the UK. A lot of the cutting edge police state type of apparatus usually comes out of there first.
Yeah, Britain is completely police. It's a complete police state right now. You can't even speak out against things, and you'll be arrested out there. I mean, look at Tommy Robinson out there. He gets arrested for speaking out, and the Muslims there could do whatever they want. I mean, they completely hide Muslim crimes, cameras everywhere. They have so very little freedom in Britain. It's absolutely crazy. Barter system was wonderful. They couldn't control you there, but
a lot of clamping down occurred after 9/11 with the denominations and the amount you can carry on you, and even prepaid credit cards and how much you can max them out as far as loading them up, the reloadables, things of that nature. I haven't used a bank in years. Since 2005, I haven't had a bank account.
The old mattress trick.
Old school, boy. Old school.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty interesting stuff, though. But yeah, you're right. Money. What do you need it for? They've taken away all our ability to do anything for ourselves. So now money is like lifeblood now, instead of Americans being able to do just about everything on their own. And that wasn't too long ago.
I'm sure you've seen the series on HBO, The Wire, about Baltimore policing and criminal elements over there. Do they do that in real policing where they create this Amsterdam-like environment on certain blocks where they just allow the thugs to make their money and keep it a violent-free zone, but allow the drug deals to take place? I think they do that in Chicago.
It's never happened when I was a cop. There was never a no-go zone, and anytime there was a really extremely bad area, we would add more police officers, more vehicles, more more details. We never backed off and said, okay, we'll let you. I worked in the worst housing project in the country. We never backed off. I walked in those. I did walking patrols there, and I also patrolled with a car. Never did we back off. Nowadays, I would think that they are going to do it because they've given in. They've given into crime. They've given into thuggery, and they're trying to make deals with them now. That's capitulation, and that is the worst thing for the community, for the good folks in the community, whatever color they are.
Hey, James, we've got a couple minutes. We got a couple minutes of the show. Just want you to close it out and let everybody know how they can find you, what other shows you're going to be on next, and just close it out and put out a good message, my friend.
All right. Well, I do YouTube. I got Downtown White Police YouTube. I also am regularly on the Political Cesspool radio program on the Liberty Broadcast Network. The book on Amazon, Downtown White Police, tells the truth about a lot of things. It's very current, but it also talks about my career, tells you who I am, and I got some very interesting stories in there and some very interesting facts that you could use in any argument. That's about it. I'm still vying for the position of South African ambassador. I want to help everybody out there. Is it going to happen? I doubt it, but I tried, and I'm still trying. He hasn't picked an ambassador yet. Let's pray for it.
Is there any way to try to help promote you and elevate you to be the person who's selected as ambassador for South Africa?
I've had some people try to contact the president, whether by letter or some other means. That's the only idea I have. I sent a formal letter. I formally applied for the position. I sent them a copy of my book. I've had a lot of people in South Africa send letters from the refugee camps to people that are higher up, and hopefully it got through. Hopefully we'll consider it.
All right. Thank you very much, James. It was a real honor to have you on my show. We should do this again sometime.
Thank you. I'd love to do it. Thanks for having me. Take care.
All right. You have a great weekend, my friend.
Okay.
Thanks. Have a good night.
This is the end.
The white people, the farmers. And he sings it and he dances. I mean, this is the president, and yet no one in the world has any outrage or even brings it up as inappropriate, at least. It's just absolutely mind-boggling. And there's so much more that's going on there. But then the land grab, they now have this land grab where they're going to legally take away land from the white South Africans. It's absolutely crazy that it's not being talked about. Of course, we know the media is full of shit. Can I swear on this channel?
Oh, yeah, man. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, sometimes I can't help myself.
Let it go, man. Let loose. This is a serious subject matter. So, yeah, let it out, man.
So it bothers me because, first of all, I do believe, I've been saying it's the template for what they're trying to do. The fact that parts of the South African government have filed with the UN and have stated that they are under a genocide, and even the UN actually, who of course I think is demonic, they recognize the fact that they are at a certain level of genocide. So it's all being denied and nobody's talking about it, and it really bothers me. And it's just part of the overall plan. What really bothers me, Nick, is that I do know the overall plan, and there's so many facets to it that's why I kind of wanted to touch on a lot of different things, because it's not just black hatred of white or getting someone back for apartheid. This is a plan, and it's being orchestrated, and it's been orchestrated, and it's happening here in the U.S. also.
Today is April 7, 2017. Welcome to the show. I do have James Lancia. James is a retired police officer who worked closely with the FBI, DEA, ATF, and statewide narcotics agencies as a patrolman in the Bridgeport Police Department in Connecticut. Lancia is the author of the book, Downtown White Police, Demonizing the Alpha Cop, Glorifying Thugs, and Militarizing Law Enforcement. James, welcome to Renegade Broadcasting once again.
Thanks for having me, Nick. I appreciate that.
Jim, let's get started here. You wanted to talk about South Africa, and then you also mentioned in our email just today America, Europe, and how dangerous the situation is, from microchipping, false flags in Syria, ethnic hatred and crime, immigration, and the fake media, and then we can touch upon other subjects as we go. So, James, let's get into South Africa.
All right, sure. South Africa to me is important because it's being completely ignored by everyone, other than people like us. The mainstream, of course, doesn't touch it. Whenever they don't want to touch something, they're trying to hide something. For your listeners who don't know, I officially applied for the position of South African ambassador from the U.S. I did officially apply. I sent correspondence to the president, and I've had other people in some fairly high positions in South Africa do the same for me.
We got to let our listeners realize who was responsible for forming the ANC in the first place. Your people like Joe Slovo.
Right. They're communist, and a lot of them are Zionist Jews, and nobody wants to talk about that. They're behind a lot of the subversion and this destabilization of once great nations,
And unfortunately, a lot of the white South Africans won't even touch that subject matter.
Nobody wants to touch it. And here's the thing that bothers me. Let's say I'm not particularly chastising anyone, right? Mm-hmm. Let's just say I'm open-minded about it, which of course I know really in depth what's going on. But let's say I'm looking at it from a perspective as a police officer who's investigating a crime. When certain people come up, you do have to mention it. But what bothers me is you cannot even mention the fact that certain people are behind certain things. It's like if you do that, again, you're just completely labeled. And it's impossible to get to the bottom of a problem if you cannot call out who's causing the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it goes back to that famous quote. People pin it on Voltaire. I've found that it wasn't actually originated from him, but to know who rules over you, realize who you're not allowed to talk about.
Right. And I just think, Americans in general get the wrong impression about who Israel is as far as as far as Christians go and as far as scripture. They're not God's chosen people. In fact, when the Bible talks about Israel, it's talking about God's people. It's talking about Christians in reality. I know you don't want to get into a religious thing, but that's just for all these Zionist Christians. They're just completely deluded. I can bring up any scriptural references to prove that, but this isn't the forum for it right now. But what's going on is not just Zionist Christians, but you got our politicians. Every one of our politicians just always mentions that Israel's first. I don't know why. I don't know why they're such a great ally. They haven't fought a war for us. They've started wars that we had to finish and fight. And a lot of these false flags, including, I believe, Syria, just the latest one in Syria, which we retaliated with a bombing. Mm-hmm. I believe they're behind this one also.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a hoax of a chemical attack. We had it being all documented by the White Helmets, who have already been outed as a NGO supported by the State Department, USAID, and British financing, as well as the company who gobbled up academia, Eric Prince's company, Constellation or something like that. They're all part of this chipping in of this NGO called the White Helmets over in Syria. And they just won an Oscar, right? Netflix documentary that came.
Trying to endorse me now. Is it a shot in the dark? Sure. But I tried and I offered to do it without being paid. That's how serious I am about this subject. Okay, now South Africa, your listeners are very well informed, but it just, to touch upon it lightly, it just bothers me that the mainstream media, with all their diversity and all their equality, never report on the fact that the South African white is a minority in South Africa, and they are now the most endangered people on this earth, statistically. In not just the farm murders, but overall racial murders by blacks. Now, of course, the South African government sugarcoats it over by just saying it's rampant crime and everybody's subject to it. But the white South African, who is a minority, is 4 times more likely to be killed by murder in South Africa than even a black. So there is something going on there. But as far as South Africa goes, it's even more than just the violence. There's 114 anti-white labor laws on the book. Did you know that, right? If companies hire whites, there's sanctions that could be put on them. There's penalties that are put on them. So it's a deliberate attack on the white population, even for employment. Now you also have the fact that they're becoming impoverished and they're moving into the squatters' camps. There's also the fact that the president himself sings songs about machine guns